it must be terrible for parents to have children who are screaming out for food and water when there's nothing there to give them. The simple solution is just to realise that we can grow food almost anywhere the sun shines. Sowed some seeds in a pot, and within a couple of weeks I had some spinach. And you don't even need language to learn how to grow food. You just need to watch.
Welcome to Unpacking Japan. I'm Toby, and today I'm sitting here with John. Thank you for coming.
Thanks a lot for having me.
John, you are expert and sustainability consultant and specializing in urban farming. And you've been doing this for about 12 years already in Tokyo.
Yes.
Working on many, many projects, which we're going to get into. But I want to ask you maybe to introduce yourself a little bit and maybe tell us, why did you come to Japan in the first place?
Okay, yeah. That story goes way back to 1963 when my father was sent from for work purposes to the UK from New Zealand, where he and I was born. And so Dad went to the UK, and he really liked to travel. And in his long weekends, he would sort of travel around the UK. And when he had more time, he would like to travel right across to Europe. And in 1963, Dad went to Norway, and he travelled around Norway, and he loved it so much that when he went back home to New Zealand, he thought that if he had a choice of a country to live outside of
New Zealand,
that place would be Norway. Mm-hmm. And he was always very enthusiastic about Norway, telling my whole family about just the beautiful, spectacular scenery. Mm-hmm. And to fast forward to 1988, I was in high school, and I was subscribing to an Australian music magazine, and they had a pen pal page. You know what pen pals are?
Yeah, so you correspond with someone somewhere in another country. Yes, by letter. And
by letter, so basically sort of using paper and pen.
It's becoming popular again, snail mail they call it.
Okay, yeah. And so that was 1988, and a Norwegian girl was looking for pen pals. And when I saw Norwegian, I thought, hey, this is good. So I wrote to her, and she's called Mogni Skiftermann. And I told her that my dad loved her country, and she wrote back, and we are still friends. It's been over 30 years now. And then fast forward to 1995, Mogni sent me a letter and said, I've just started writing to this Japanese girl in Tokyo, Japan, and she's cute, and she may be your type. And it turns out that she was, and we've been married now for 20 years and have 2 kids.
What a way to meet your wife.
We basically were pen friends from 1995. And in I think it was 2001, we started calling from Tokyo to Auckland. And there was 1 month in 2001 where her phone bill was like 90,000 yen. 90. And she realized, I could buy a one-way plane ticket to Auckland for that price.
$800 nearly, right?
And so we thought, this is a bit stupid, and one of us should move. So I moved over here in 2002. I've been here since.
So it's been about 20 years here in Japan.
It's been 20 years last year.
Congratulations. That's a long time.
It's been a while.
Yeah. So throughout all these 20 years, how did you even get into the idea of urban farming? Did you start immediately kind of working in garden-related activities, farming-related activities, which in Tokyo I can imagine are not so common?
They're pretty few and far between. No, I basically had no experience, full stop. I was just like most people here who, when I wanted food, I would just go to the supermarket and buy what I needed. That all changed in 2011 when the Tohoku quake hit. And that earthquake and tsunami hit about 2.5 weeks after a massive, deadly quake hit Christchurch.
Yes, I remember that.
New Zealand. And my auntie was affected by it. She had cracks down her wall. And my cousin was also involved in the recovery effort in the middle of Christchurch. Mm-hmm. So those 2 earthquakes happened within 2.5 weeks of each other. And I was up in Tokyo on the 6th floor of an office building at work. And I recall the look of shock on my workmates' faces. I'd never seen them so scared. I was panicking myself. And from that day onwards, I just thought, right, if a massive earthquake hit Tokyo, like the size of the one that hit up in Fukushima, and the supermarkets got destroyed, roads got blocked, and the trucks that supply the food from the farms to the supermarkets couldn't get through to the supermarkets, I just thought, where would food come from? And
that's a big question, right?
And Tokyo's got about 14 million people, and I'm sure that many of them have spare supplies in case of earthquakes, but I would say that most of those supplies would run out within about 7 days.
That's a short time.
Which would mean you would have millions of people with no food, and probably no water too. So I thought, that's a really big problem. What am I going to do about it? And at that point, my wife and I, we had our first kid, who was about 3 years old. And I thought, it must be terrible for parents to have children who are screaming out for food and water when there's nothing there to give them. So I thought, what's the deal? What's my answer to this? And I had no answer. So I thought, this is not good. And then it hit me. We should actually have a supply of food at home.
Within the cities?
At home, as near as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So I bought a flower pot, and I bought some soil, and I bought a packet of spinach seeds, sort of something like this.
Exactly the same kind of seeds
Yes.
that you just brought with us.
Yeah. And I sowed some seeds in a pot, and within a couple of weeks I had some spinach. And then I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm growing food for the first time ever. So I bought some more pots, bought some more soil, and bought some more seeds. And within a few months, I had a little back garden of food growing flower pots.
Did you ever have any background in farming or such kind of related activities
I had
before?
nothing at all. I just taught myself. And luckily, my wife, her father was a urban farmer in our same town.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she was a girl, she would go to her dad's garden, and he taught her how to grow food. I'm not actually sure whether he taught her or that she just learned by watching,
Mm-hmm.
because many children learn how to grow food just by watching their parents grow food.
Yeah.
Not actually, here's how to sow seeds, you've got to put the seeds in a pot, blah, blah, blah. No, these kind of skills can be learned just by watching.
It's like watching your parents
yes.
cook a recipe, cook a meal, and you just kind of pick up on, oh, she adds this much salt, or she adds this kind of...
And you don't even need language to learn how to grow food. You just need to watch. And talking about food, this is some leaves that I brought down from Tokyo for us. I picked them yesterday. They're basically baby leaves like these ones here.
So these kind of seeds that you brought here, kind of a package here for those that are watching, can turn into these beautiful green baby leaves. Very green, very fresh.
Yep, and they're basically grown without using chemicals. And all we need to do to eat them is just pick them up and eat them.
So no need for any kind of additional... Wow.
I think these ones here are a little bit spicy. Those ones there.
That's interesting because so while we're tasting those, these greens, I eat vegetables very regularly and I buy every day from the supermarket. But the salad or the baby leaves sometimes taste a bit bland, and so you buy a lot of dressing and you add, all kind of sauces on them. But these are very flavorful, just on their own.
Try some more, yeah.
So I want to ask you, before we get further into the topic of urban farming, for someone who's never really heard, they may imagine urban, like city farming, okay, agriculture, but you imagine kind of big pieces of land and tractors kind of plowing the land and just like large-scale agriculture. How can someone visualize urban farming? What exactly is it, if you'd have to describe it?
Urban farming is basically city farming. So it's basically growing food, and we're talking basically vegetables, herbs, and possibly fruit in city spaces. So we're not talking about livestock. I'm not talking about cows, chickens, lambs, that kind of thing. So it's basically growing food in city spaces.
Mm-hmm.
That's the big difference between urban farming and traditional farming. But the challenge, which I treat as an opportunity, is basically lack of shade. is basically too much
shade.
Too much shade
among the big buildings, especially in
Yep.
cities like Tokyo.
and also not much space and almost no soil in places like Tokyo. So it becomes very challenging to find places to grow food. But the simple solution is just to realize that we can grow food almost anywhere the sun shines. And
as long as there's light, you can grow food.
Yes. And the best place to grow food in a city is usually, we just got to look up to the rooftops, because most rooftops usually get really good sunshine. In Tokyo, there's another challenge, which is the typhoon season. Which if you have a rooftop garden, typhoons can completely devastate those, but you just got to move your planting containers first. But there's an amazing array of places that we can grow food in cities, even when there's no soil, no exposed soil.
When we drive through cities in Japan or walk around, sometimes on the outskirts, people may notice like there's an array of housing, and in the middle there's still like this kind of small rice farm, which is not very large, but producing rice. Is this part of urban farming, or is this kind of just a leftover of agriculture that was there before?
That would just be a leftover from what was there before. For example, the town that my family lives in like North Tokyo, there's about 28 or so community gardens, which are basically they're like standard house-sized plots that are gardens. And I don't think they've been converted to gardens. They just haven't been built on. But about 80 or 90 years ago, the whole town was rice paddies. The whole town was rice paddies. Now there's no rice paddies there at all. And it sort of really goes to show how urban development has quashed farming. I'm guessing that the whole of the country used to be just natural land at one point, and then people just sort of chose where to start living and where to start setting up townships, which became larger towns
and major cities, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen those aerial maps of Japan, where basically, if you look at the geography of the country, there are only 3 major basins with flat land. So the Tokyo area, the Nagoya area, and here Osaka area are the major 3 flatlands. And now, if you look from a satellite photo, it's nearly all constructed. But this will be, or would have been, the only arable land here in Japan, because it's the only kind of land that's really flat on a large scale where you can conduct these.
No, I've seen satellite photos of Japan, and I was really shocked when I saw the first ones, because most of this country is green. But then the major cities are basically just grayed out zones where there's so much concrete. But the rest of Japan's green.
But it's mountainous and forests. So if we get back to the topic of urban farming, basically it's the idea of growing food in the cities, not herding cattle and such, but really more focusing on seed-based, plant-based food. And it can grow anywhere where there is light. And you said the most common place where it can be grown in a city is the rooftops. Right?
That'll be the best place to grow.
The best place. If we think about just urban farming in general, would you say it's more like a private endeavor? So like you and your family or your partner will start doing urban farming in the city? Or is it some kind of a corporate activity where companies are trying to reutilize city space to kind of produce food in cities?
No, it's mainly the first, but I wish it was more the second. In most cases, it's families who are sort of growing food themselves, either on their rooftop, their balcony, or in sunlit spaces around their homes. I really wish that it was more corporate backed, to basically get the money out there and to get the money being used to reutilize city spaces, especially underused car parks. Underused car parks, where there's like, you might have a car park where there's like 60 car parking spaces, and if only like 10 or 20 of them are regularly used, then there's the potential to basically sort of reuse maybe over half of that car parking space and just set up raised gardens and build food for the locals and basically grow food for the locals. And in the States, there's a quite a well-known rooftop garden in New York called Eagle Street Rooftop Farm, and it's built on top of a disused donut factory 3 stories, and this rooftop farm, they basically taken that over the entire rooftop.
Wow.
And they've converted to a farm, and they run farming tours. They run farming training where students and just the locals can go to the rooftop and they'll be taught about how to grow food. And this rooftop farm supplies food to local cafes and restaurants.
That's pretty cool.
They take it there by bikes. So this one rooftop farm is a food source, and it's on top of an old building. And that's just one building. New York, like Tokyo, like Osaka here, has got thousands of buildings
Literally
that
thousands,
could be converted into rooftop farms and massively boost the food supply.
So if we go back a little bit, 12 years ago, following the 2 major earthquakes that hit New Zealand and Tokyo, your home country and the country you were living in, you realized, okay, something needs to be done about food safety and we need to be able to produce more food close to home. And you get yourself into urban farming, self-taught. When was a point where you decided like you're going to turn this into a full-time work and not just do this as a hobby for your family, and you realize you want to start teaching others about it and turn yourself basically in this kind of consultant that you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've got my daughter to basically thank for that. Because when she was 4 years old, I started renting a plot in a local community garden in 2012, which was 1 year after those 2 earthquakes. And I basically started renting a 15 square meter plot for 5,000 yen to rent it for 10 months. And in my first year, I grew 1,600 tomatoes and about 300 cucumbers and all this. I grew lettuces and herbs. And it just blew me away how much food that I grew. I'm not trying to show off here because this is basically nature, not me. I was just supporting the natural process of growing food, and nature did the rest.
I'm just trying to picture like the 1,600 tomatoes in front of me grown from this. That's a lot of tomatoes. You can eat them for days and days.
Those tomatoes, they were grown from 8 plants that were planted in 2 square meters. So this table is about 2 square meters.
Yes.
So I had 1 tomato plant growing there, one 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 there.
So 8 plants.
8 plants in 2 square meters. They all grew higher than 2 meters. Each plant grew about, it was maybe 150 tomatoes. For 1 plant, they cost about 200 yen. So 1 tomato was like approximately 1 yen, if not cheaper. That's virtually free.
And when you go to the supermarket now on the way home from work and you want to buy a tomato in Japan, you pay between 200 and 300 yen. So your bag of seeds that produced all those tomatoes basically costs the same as buying one single freshly, or not freshly, but grown tomato in the supermarket.
Before the food prices started going up recently, you can buy like 1 carton of about 12 tomatoes for 200 yen. That means 1 tomato is about 15 or so yen. This is like cherry tomatoes, they're very small. 15 yen for 1 tomato. What a ripoff. When you grow them yourself, they can be virtually free. And the farmers know that. Yeah. So it's very cost effective. I took my daughter to my community garden and I showed her how to sow seeds. So I basically poured some seeds into her hand and showed her how to drop them onto the soil and to cover the seeds with soil and then to water them. And she learned how to do that in about 30 seconds, and she was 4. So there's no excuse for any older person to say, oh, I can't grow food. Yeah, and when that happened, I sort of quickly realized I've just taught a child how to grow food. And prior to that, I had no experience of teaching anything, not even English. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And then I thought, okay, how else can I teach children? And then I thought, okay, schools have lots of them. So I got in touch with a school that I had, that I knew the founder of, Tokyo International School. And I contacted the founder and said, does your school grow food? And he replied and said, no, we don't, but I'm interested to find out more. Would you like to come in? So I went in and I took a whole lot of photos of the food that I had been growing that spring at my community garden patch, and I covered the table with all these photos of food. And they basically hired me on the spot and said, would you like to teach our students how to grow food at school? And all I had proposed at the start was to take in 10 planter boxes and use some of the space at school to grow seeds. And that was a free offer for the school. And then I was asked to teach. And I just thought, man, I've never taught anyone anything before. But I thought, this is too good to turn down. So I wrote back the next day and said, yes, I'm keen. But I had no lessons. I had nothing to teach. So I spent the next 3 months nearly killing myself.
Preparing curriculum.
Creating 10 different lessons that I could start teaching.
Okay.
And I started teaching those, and the reception was fantastic. And I finished up teaching at that school. I was just wrapped up my latest urban farming project there last month after 10 years. And that one school got me into 16 other schools and kindergartens around Tokyo. And now it's taking off. It's just going nuts.
Congratulations.
It's really amazing.
It's great to see that so many people are eager to learn about this, and especially children, right? Because they will be the next generation to really kind of grow up with this in mind to have the possibility to do this.
Yes, yeah.
When you approach schools or just talk about urban farming with adults, what are some common misconceptions people have about urban farming where they may think, oh, this is not for me, or this is too complex, or it requires, I don't know, a big investment or...
Yeah, I think the main misconceptions are, one, that growing food is difficult. Two, that they might not have the space to grow food. And three, they simply don't know how to grow food. And when they find out how easy it is to grow food, once people learn that you only need to have a space that receives about 3 to 4 hours of direct sunshine per day to grow food, things change. And things are changing much faster now because there's a much greater awareness of sustainability. Sustainability is the concept, and that's being pushed by the SDGs worldwide, is making people think, right, how can we grow food more sustainably? And when you grow food without chemicals, getting back to a comment that you made further back about how these leaves taste better, and the ones that you've tried from the shops tend to be more bland. That's, I think, basically because these ones have been grown without chemicals. And when food is grown with chemicals, it tends to suppress the flavor. Well, that's what I found, which makes people want to put the salad dressing on top. And that salad dressing contains chemicals. Those leaves were sprayed with chemicals, so there's like a double hit. But when you grow your own food without chemicals, they'll taste better, like you noted, and you probably won't need the salad dressing that contains chemicals. So you can go from double chemicals to zero chemicals.
And one of the common arguments about using the pesticide, for example, is, it prevents from pest, right? And people may be worried about, if I grow this, maybe there'll be a lot of insects on my balcony or on the roof, or maybe the crops will suddenly die from something. Is this a misconception, or is this something that has other ways to be kind of taken care of?
There's more than a few different ways that food can be protected from insects. You can just use an insect net to keep, for example, butterflies away from your leaves. If you can stop butterflies from landing on your plants, then they can't lay eggs, which will become caterpillars. That's that problem dealt with. If you are growing food on a balcony or rooftop, you won't have any slugs or snails because they can't climb that high. Simply the growing location can change the whole dynamic. But it's very simple to keep insects away without spraying. It's very simple.
So what are the challenges, if any, except for getting 3 to 4 hours of direct sunlight in a city environment?
The challenges are, the main one's probably lack of space. But the reality with that is that we can actually grow food on walls. So if you have a sunlit wall like that one out there, you can grow food vertically using nets, using chains, using hooks. Empty vertical space like that, if that was outside, that could be converted into a massive
vertical
wall
garden
farm.
basically.
Yes,
so
easily.
The idea that people have of farming needs just wide land is kind of like an old preconception of it. And in modern times, there have been many innovative ways to just farm and produce plants
and
vegetables.
Yeah, and one of the game changers is quite simply a lack of awareness that it's possible to grow food vertically or on a rooftop. Once people are told that that's possible and shown how to do it, it will change the game. It will completely change everything for them, because people won't try something that they don't know that is possible. But if you tell someone that it's possible to grow food on a wall or on their roof, it'll make them think, oh, what can I do to do this?
So right now, part of your challenges or your goals as a sustainability consultant is not only for them to educate on how to do it, but also to bring awareness to the possibilities. Because if more people realize what can be done with urban farming, the process will accelerate, right? Like you just said, your own business is taking off recently, and more people are getting interested. But if this becomes exponential, suddenly we could cover all the roofs of Tokyo and Osaka, which are mostly flat, with urban gardens, right?
Yeah, that's my goal to basically to teach people so that they can reach the point, so that they can teach others. I'm just one person. I want to teach people to become trainers themselves and to become skilled at growing food to the point where they can teach their kids, teach their friends, teach their parents, teach their neighbors, teach their workmates how to grow food, and then spread that knowledge organically outwards.
So have you noticed now in your 12 years of doing this actively in Tokyo, connecting with a lot of schools and also perhaps companies and other individuals outside of schools, that there is a community developing within Tokyo of urban farmers and kind of people actively starting to promote this as well?
Yeah, there's been a community for there for years, and you can basically find them on like social media platforms like on Facebook and Twitter. But I think there in Tokyo, most people are hobby farmers. They sort of grow food for themselves at home. I'm one of the very few who's actually started their own business, and I've basically got a commercial enterprise going. And yeah, so I'm sort of promoting it through schools, but there's certainly networks where people share information about growing food, and if those networks can be expanded, fantastic.
You mentioned, for example, the building in New York where the roof is starting to produce food for local cafes and restaurants around this. Do we see something similar in Japan, in Tokyo, where some rooftop gardens are now producing food for surrounding restaurants and cafes and kind of turning the farm to table from rooftop to table kind of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I could say yes, but I'm going to say no. Mori Buildings. It's a big commercial real estate company in Tokyo. They have built some rooftop farms, but they're mainly for their staff.
Okay.
And they're also, I think, for PR purposes, but they're not really to share food to other.
So it's used for
people.
PR for the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals that the government is pushing a lot, and to show that they're doing something for it, but not necessarily used to their full potential.
No. When it comes to rooftop farms, one of my biggest projects happened in 2018, where the Grand Hyatt Tokyo hired me to set up a small 4 raised bed garden right outside the hotel's main restaurant, the French kitchen. And the Grand Hyatt basically wanted it so that the chef could show customers that the food on their plates came from the garden right outside that window. Plus, they wanted to do it for PR purposes too. And that was just one hotel that had a flat space outside one of their restaurants. Many hotels have space like that, and they could use the rooftops too. So the potential's there, but I think what's missing is the awareness of how to utilize that potential and how to transform that space into gardens. And that's what I'm sort of really trying to push now. I post incessantly on Facebook all about food, and it's working. More and more people around Tokyo and Japan are noticing, and I think they're being inspired to learn how to grow food themselves, which is great, but it would be good to have more people who would actively promote, here's how we can grow food at schools, in car parks, on rooftops, anywhere the sun shines.
Have you seen some kind of public media interest in the topic, where you see broadcast companies like NHK or TV5 or whatever all the TV channels are called, or newspapers start to report about this and show this more and more on TV, or is this not yet kind of a common topic of discussion?
Last year, I was interviewed by NHK World.
Okay.
Like about my work. I've been featured on the New Zealand Current Affairs program on television. It's, I don't know, urban farming. I don't think it's seen by the media to be a big thing. It's more seen by ordinary people who are becoming more aware of sustainability.
So literally a grassroots movement.
It's a grassroots thing, yeah. And I think that's how it's going to continue to be promoted until we reach a tipping point where the media has to stand up and take note. But I don't think we've reached that point yet. But that said, I've received amazing media publicity. My work's been featured in multiple magazines, radio, TV. It's really surprising because all I'm doing is showing people how to grow food from these. It's not rocket science, it's nothing special.
So let's talk about the actual growing of this food, right? We briefly mentioned, so rooftops are a good place to do it. Vertical gardens are becoming more and more popular. What kind of crops are popular or easy to grow? If I want to start tomorrow and I have, let's say, balcony space where I can put, I don't know, a square back of soil, what can I grow inside that would be easy?
Yep. That's a really common question, and my usual answer is, what do you want to grow?
Well, something that I can probably eat in my own kitchen, right? Tomatoes or cucumbers, something that comes frequently up in salads or...
That's probably, that's a good first step. But the next step that you need to realize is that different food needs different sun exposure. For example, green leafy vegetables like spinach and mizuna, chingensa, that kind of thing, they need about 2 to 3 hours of sunshine a day. They'll be quite happy.
If they get more, what happens?
They'll be happier.
Okay.
But if you want to grow climbing plants that produce fruit, like tomatoes, paprika, cucumbers, the plants that produce fruit, they need a lot more energy to produce that fruit, which means that they need more sunshine because they use the sunshine to do the photosynthesis thing to produce the sugars that they need to grow. So the climbing plants, they need about 7 or 8 hours of direct sunshine a day. Many people don't have that, especially if they're on the dark side of a building where the sun shines that way and they're living on this side. But the answer there is just to get access to the rooftop.
If you have access to the rooftop.
Or you don't even have to own your own space to grow food. You can just talk to your friend, talk to your workmates, talk to your family even, and ask them, do you have some sunlit space that receives a lot of sunshine? Do you have a accessible rooftop on your mansion, on your house, on your parents' house? If so, let's collaborate to grow food. So the point here is that you don't even have to own your own space. You don't even have to have space to grow food. If you know someone who does, they can completely change the game. Getting back to your question, we can grow almost anything that the farmers can grow in the city, even rice.
Even right on your balcony?
Even rice, yep, you can grow food. Yep, grow rice, yes. So whatever the farmers can grow out there in the countryside can potentially be grown here in the city. In my community garden, I've grown everything except rice.
Except for rice.
I've grown broccoli, cabbages, which grow to like 1/2 meter around. I've grown all the herbs. I've grown strawberries, lettuces, you name it.
What is the kind of yield on this? Because I know nothing about agriculture, and my idea, for example, on our balcony right now we have a lemon tree, and we get 3 to 5 lemons once a year. That will start growing during the spring and get very green, and then when the temperatures drop, actually 2 weeks ago for Christmas we harvested them and we turned them into like a lemon cake, which was delicious. But it's 3 lemons once a year. You said earlier when you rented your first space, which was 15 square meters, you had 1,600 tomatoes. So if I plant like some tomato seeds and I have like, I don't know, 2 or 3 trees growing, how often do tomatoes ripen, and can you take them?
Okay, yeah. When it comes to tomatoes, the best thing to do is just buy the seedlings. They'll cost about 250 to maybe 300 yen. And the seedlings save about 1 month because they're like they're baby plants. If you want to grow tomatoes, you just buy the plants in March or April, plant them in a large container, not a small one. Because if you plant a plant in a small container like this little coffee cup here, the roots of the plant will quickly realize that they are constricted. And when the roots realize that they can't grow outwards, it will stunt it will stop growing. It will basically stop growing large. So the best idea to grow large plants, which will produce lots of food, is to use the largest possible container, so that you can basically trick the plants to think that they are growing
in a like wide open space, basically.
In the ground. And if you can trick the plants to think that, then they'll grow to their maximum size. And I've found this out by mistake. I bought a little strawberry plant, and I planted it in a little pot. It grew about that big, and I got about 5 strawberries from it. Next year I used a much larger plant, a much larger container, and it grew much bigger, and I got many more strawberries from it.
Interesting.
I'm just like goldfish. If you keep a goldfish in a little tank, it won't grow very big. If you move it or transplant it, so to speak, into a larger tank, it'll grow bigger.
And the only thing you need is basically feed them sunlight and feed them water.
Yes.
Do you need to do any kind of care? Sometimes on social media, we will see videos of, okay, if you mix leftover banana, for example, and you let it sink in like water, the potassium from the banana peel and such will go into the water, which will be a good nutrient for the soil, for your plants, and other kind of tips and tricks for things to use. Or you can mix this and this to use as a natural pesticide or pest repellent.
Yeah. Those kind of tips, they're good if for specific plants, but you just but to get started, all you need is general purpose soil, which you can spot from a garden shop or a home store simply by, they come in different sizes, normally 12 litre, 14 litre and 25 litre bags. And if the packet of soil has pictures of vegetables and flowers, that is general purpose soil. That's all you need to get started.
So if you're in Japan and you go to a shop like Conan and you can't read kanji and you don't know which soil to get, look for like flowers and...
Yep, and they'll normally be tomatoes and flowers. Yep, and if you can identify that, then that's what you need to grow. Yep, it is really that simple.
Let's imagine I live downtown and my apartment is on a main avenue with a lot of traffic. Should I be worried about all the exhaust fumes coming out of the cars? Will this affect the crops somehow, or is it not really?
That's a good question. I would just say just make sure that you wash the leaves before you eat them, because any soot from cars will go.
Let's have some more.
They'll go onto the surface of those leaves, but if you wash it off, that should be fine. Yeah.
I mean, they're really, really green. Like I'm very amazed that it's really different, noticeably different from the supermarket greens.
Guess how long these ones take to grow? That number there, see that
20
number there?
days.
20 days, yeah. This is one more misconception about that some people have about growing food, that it takes a long time. 20 days here, this is actually quite a long time. I've grown some baby leaf seeds. From seeds, it took 14 days, that's 2 weeks, until those leaves were like about that big, and I picked them and ate them, just like these ones here. So 20 days, these are basically mixed baby leaves, and this is quite a standard time, but they can grow faster than that, which means that you can basically start growing seeds, these ones here, and they will grow into those in like less than 1 month.
Can you mix seeds into the same kind of container of soil?
Yes, you can. Yeah. These ones here, they're mixed seeds anyway that produce these mixed leaves. So you don't have to grow your different vegetables in separate containers. You can mix them up as long as you don't mix up the large vegetables, because larger ones need more space. For example, lettuces, typically the spacing like between lettuces that you need is about 20 centimeters, because most lettuces grow to about 20 centimeters.
So space it out a little bit, but you can
about
mix
20
it up.
centimeters. But you can mix baby leaf seeds and anything that you can grow and pick quickly, like mizuna, like this one here, or chingensai, which is also called bok choy, and baby leaves. You can mix them all up in one pot, so that you grow a pot of mixed baby leaves.
One of your slogans that you use in when kind of promoting your sustainability consulting business is healthy food, healthy people, healthier planet.
Healthier planet.
So it sounds like everyone and everything is winning. What is really holding it back? Why is there not more attention put on this? Why are people not starting to do this on their balcony more?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, and one of the answers that I've come up with about that, specifically here to Japan, is how easy it is to get food. The big cities like Tokyo, they're awash in food. You go to any major supermarket and it's full of food.
Or you just go to the convenience down the street,
Yeah.
down your building, and you can buy.
That's it. It's almost too easy to access food here. So why should you bother growing it? Well, if you value your long-term health and you don't like eating poison food that has been sprayed with toxic pesticides, that's a good reason. Also, if you are keen to improve your self-sufficiency and have a food supply that you can rely on if there's a massive earthquake then there's sort of multiple reasons to grow food. But to me, one of the big reasons is basically to help to build a more sustainable future, which sounds like a pretty common cliche, but that's exactly what this does. And when you grow food without chemicals, we're doing exactly the same that every generation before us did. That's why we are here today, because someone's growing food somewhere using sun and soil and water, growing food naturally. So what's holding us back? Well, like I said here, easily accessible food, but I think also it's just a lack of awareness about how to grow food and why we should grow food at home or locally. But the big deal is that right throughout human history, growing food locally is what every generation did. They would just move to a new location and people could stay where they were because they grew farms next to where they lived.
And now in a globalized economy, we basically import from all over the world, right?
Yeah.
Especially crops that are not grown domestically, and also because we need larger volume than maybe can be produced locally, so we need to import.
Yeah, so as cities have expanded, the farms have always been surrounding the big cities. What I'm trying to do is to basically get the food, move the food supply, or move part of the food supply from the countryside directly to where people eat it, which has multiple benefits, especially in terms of food miles, self-sufficiency, and we can grow food that's really tasty, just like these leaves here.
Yeah, they are. They really are.
Really
I wish people that are listening or watching could get a taste of this and kind of make their own opinion of this. It's easy to say it tastes good, but you have to taste it. Yeah. I want to get back to the topic that we started this, which got you into all of this, the food security in case of emergencies, but also generally speaking. What will be required, like if all the roofs of Tokyo would be covered in farms and everyone would grow something on the balcony, would there be enough food produced to feed a city or an urban area which has 38 million people? Or is it still not enough?
That would not be enough, most likely. But it would greatly improve the self-sufficiency, the food self-sufficiency level of the people within that city. And I think that any improvement that we can make will be good. Then again, there's a thing that holds many people back, which is simply regulations and rules, and also commerce too. Because many people think, that if enough people grow food themselves, they're going to cut down how much that they buy from shops, which will impact the local economy. Yes, it will. But what's really important? Is it to promote the economy or to build a more sustainable future? To me, the latter is much more important than the former. So mindset and how far we see into the future, to me, is very important.
You just mentioned the regulations. Are there any regulations that are preventing or facilitating the development of urban farming? Is it okay for anyone to suddenly use a roof to plant things? Or perhaps are there restrictions? Before we started recording, you said, for example, in typhoon season, you have to really be careful about everything you grow because you have to move it away. It could fly off the roof. And someone walking downstairs or passing by could be hit by a plant of tomato. Are there regulations like this that are preventing or facilitating the development of urban farming?
From what I've heard, when it comes to rooftops, they need to have a protective fencing of, I think it's about 1.1 meters height minimum, so that people don't basically topple off the side. And also, and regulations. I'm not sure whether there's any regulations in the big cities. I know certain other cities like Paris has recently introduced regulations to promote rooftop gardening, which is fantastic. I don't see that happening in Japan. I certainly hope it does. But of course, there's weight issues. For example, when soil gets wet, it probably doubles in weight. There's safety concerns, but also, like before we even get into those issues, there's also, can we actually get to the rooftop? Some rooftops are not accessible, and others they're not structurally strong enough to hold large weights. So if you want to grow large scale on a rooftop, it's a good idea to talk to the building architect just to check the strength of the rooftop and then make sure that it's accessible. Is there a nearby water supply? Because you don't really want to be carrying water containers from the 7th or 8th floor to the rooftop. And is it safe? So safe, accessible are the two main things that we should be looking at first.
So no kind of clear government guidelines preventing anything. It's more like just a localized building by building, security, basic security and accessibility question.
From what I know, yes.
In the 12 years that you've been doing now urban farming, have you seen a lot of change in the industry, in perhaps the technology, if any, is being used in the endeavor?
Oh, yeah, okay. There's been a lot, in Tokyo, which is basically what I can mainly speak about, there hasn't been much change besides what I've been pushing myself, to be honest. But also one of my main teaching partners, Richard Mayes, he's now getting into promoting hydroponics, basically tower gardens, which are they're basically tube cylindrical plastic tubes that have little holes around the sides that you can plant plants in. And Richard's been getting tower gardens into different schools that we both work at, so that staff and students can learn how to grow food hydroponically, which is basically with no soil. And you just need a power supply to supply power to the water pump, which pumps water up and then sprays water down onto the plant roots. And if you grow food in a tower garden, you can grow your food much faster than if you grow it using soil.
What's the difference with and without soil?
The difference is that when plants grow in soil, their roots are basically constantly looking for two things: for water and for nutrients. And if the soil that plants are growing in don't have much of either, then the plant won't grow so fast. When you grow food hydroponically, the roots don't grow in soil; they're exposed. And in this tower garden setup that I mentioned, the roots are sprayed with a nutrient-filled water. So the roots get everything they need without even trying, which gives the plant much more time and energy to grow faster, and they do. Yep.
So it's like power feeding them, basically.
It's like basically power. It's like putting yes, it is.
Plants on steroids.
Plants on steroids, yeah. They don't have to struggle to get what they need to grow. because it's all basically sprayed onto their roots directly. So it leads to much faster plant growth.
So your colleague Richard Myers, you said,
Yes.
is working on kind of promoting hydroponics and these
Yes.
kind of different systems, whereas you're still focused on the traditional urban farming in pots, plants, vertical gardens.
Yes, I have total faith in the way that our ancestors grew food.
Is there any technology being involved into urban farming?
Indoor farming. Indoor farming. I think Toshiba has built quite a few indoor farms, basically plant factories indoors, where they use LED lighting and hydroponic systems to grow food indoors. There's a company in the States called Freight Farms, where they basically use repurposed shipping containers, and they turn them into indoor farms. And the really good thing about these farms is that outside nature and seasons have no effect anymore, and even daylight and night have no effect either, because food's grown using artificial lighting, and the temperature is controlled within the container or the indoor farm, which means that food can be grown 12 hours a day, right throughout the whole year, even right through winter.
So those basically would be kind of stepping away a little bit from urban farming, but more factory farming and finding ways to improve food security by being able to grow more faster on smaller space.
Yes, yeah. And these freight farms, they can be piled up on top of each other too. So there's cases where there might be like 2 or 3 shipping container farms vertically.
So where now we were talking about planting a garden on rooftops, we could basically turn an entire skyscraper into floors and floors and floors of vertical farms.
And there's many what's called I forget what they're called. Basically, they're like they're plans and diagrams of how commercial buildings could be completely transformed into indoor farms. I've seen too many of them. I've yet to see one that's actually been built. So there's a lot of people out there who have great ideas, and when it comes to converting commercial buildings into farms, but I don't think they've actually been created yet. They're going to need more money.
Yeah, investments, right? But
yes.
It's on the way, probably.
I certainly hope it is. Yes.
Have you noticed anything in the field of urban farming that is maybe specific to Japan and not really done overseas? Or vice versa?
No. Japan's probably quite a bit behind urban farming in certain, like compared to certain cities around the world. For example, New York and Boston, San Francisco, Paris, and other major world cities are sort of quite a way advanced compared to Japan, especially when it comes to rooftop farms. But the potential is there. And I think what's happening is that thanks to social media, it's really simple to spread ideas. So if you post anything about whatever you're doing on social media, it can potentially have a global spread audience. And that's what's happening. And that's one of the really really exciting things about using social media to promote what I'm doing personally. I can influence and motivate and inspire people worldwide simply based on what I'm doing here in Tokyo.
Do you get more responses from overseas, or a lot of also Japanese people kind of getting interested in?
Mainly people here, but more than a few people who I've known who used to live here who have moved back to their own countries are now growing food because of what they've seen me doing here.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Have you noticed in the last 3 years throughout COVID and the pandemic any change in urban farming? Has it affected?
Absolutely amazing. COVID completely devastated many people's lives and jobs, but I found that with my urban farming work, it had the complete opposite effect, and it was amazing to see. The COVID pandemic, it was like putting rocket fuel under urban farming, and it was I think for one major reason, because the COVID pandemic, it it made many people scared to go outside.
Yeah.
And we all needed food.
And a lot of people were not allowed to go outside.
They were basically locked up at home. And we all needed food. And I think those two states, those two things made many people around the world realize, hey, I'm scared to go outside to go shopping to the supermarket. My family needs food. What am I going to do? And then many people came to the same realization I did 12 years ago. It's a good idea to grow food at home. And the COVID pandemic, from what I read, it really triggered a massive increase in awareness and interest in urban farming worldwide. I was reading of plant shops selling out of seeds and seedlings everywhere. And I found for the first year ever, I had successfully rented my community garden plot for 9 years straight until COVID hit. And I was expecting, in my 10th year, that's going to be easy. Then COVID hit, and suddenly a lot more people started applying for community garden plots, and I missed out for the first year. And I just won again. It's like a lottery to win a plot in a local community garden. I finally won again last year. But I think it was like a 2-year break where the interest and demand for community garden plots skyrocketed because of COVID, I think. So COVID's been a blessing, and it's been a blessing. It's been amazing. It's really increased interest in my work, especially from schools and businesses and people everywhere.
So if someone now is listening to this or watching us and is now interested after hearing your story and hearing everything you've shared and wants to get started, we talked about, all you need is seeds and, sunlight and some water. But what advice would you give them so that they can start doing this, be consistent, and maybe kind of turn this into something more sustainable in the long term?
Basically stop reading and stop thinking about it and start doing something about it. So basically that means going out and buying gardening gear, for example, flower pots, planter boxes, and buying some soil and buying seeds like these and buying seedlings too. And then just start growing. Use the internet to find out how to grow. I can describe that in about 30 seconds. You just need some seeds, put some soil into a pot nearly to the top, make the top of the soil flat, sprinkle some seeds on the soil, and then you just need to cover those seeds with no more than 1 centimeter of soil on top of those seeds, and then just water them, and then you put your pot where the sun shines.
You water every day?
Yep, water daily, yep. During the warmer seasons like spring and summer and autumn, during winter we just need to water maybe once every 2 to 3 days. That's it.
So your advice would be stop thinking about it and get started. Just start.
Yep. You'll never learn without doing, and the more mistakes that you make, the better. Because and the more mistakes you make, the more ways that you'll learn not to grow food next time. And this is how anyone becomes an expert in anything. Is just to make mistakes. So that you learn what not to do next time, and you gradually become better and better and better until you reach the point where you can become an expert.
If they're looking for resources, you mentioned the internet. Do you have any specific recommendations of maybe articles or books or videos or places where people can find some maybe necessary things?
No. All you need is really just YouTube, just to basically watch YouTube videos of people describing how to sow seeds. One thing to be careful of is local growing seasons. And for example, I spent quite a bit of time many years ago looking for a Japan planting calendar in English that would show when to sow carrot seeds, when to sow tomato seeds, when to sow cucumber seeds, and when to harvest them. And I couldn't find any. It was all like Japanese. And when I did Google searches, I was finding planting calendars for New Zealand and Australia and Canada and France and the States, nothing for Japan in English. So I basically made my own. I just sort of translated the seed sowing information from Japanese sowing seeds, and I converted it into a Japan planting calendar in English. And that's been really useful. So you need to basically note your local growing seasons. Here in Japan, that's basically from March until now. So the commercial farmers, they normally start sowing seeds in greenhouses in about February, and they grow seedlings that they start selling to the shops in March and April. But we can do exactly the same thing. We can start off seeds inside where it's warmer, and then we can, when those seeds grow to be seedlings, we can plant them outside at the start of spring. Here in Japan, that's March to April. And then we can grow from March and April right through the year, depending on what we grow, until about the middle of November, when the temperature drops to the point where plant growth will stop. That doesn't mean plants die. That just means that they stop getting bigger. But you can have plants in the ground that can still be growing now. For an example, my community garden now is full of food. It's absolutely full of food. I can't eat or give it away fast enough. I'm growing lettuces, I'm growing all the herbs that I need, paprika, everything. And it's all green. And now it's what's it now? It's the start of January. It's winter, but the food's still there. So we can grow here in Japan for about 10 months.
That's pretty good. It's most of the year. Right?
That's a really good growing season.
Yeah.
That's long. Yeah.
We talked about a lot of things, about the need for urban farming, kind of understand how it works and what it is, what is necessary for it. We talked about the specificities of growing seeds and how you can do it at home on a balcony in pots and how you can get started. Some regulations, things to be aware of, especially in Japan with rooftop accessibility and such. We talked about the community aspect, social media. Is there anything that we haven't really touched upon regarding urban farming that you feel like is important to talk about?
Yes. That's basically the community aspect of urban farming. And from what I found from experience, a garden doesn't just attract insects. It can attract people too. So if a person built a garden in the middle of a busy Osaka or Tokyo, it would make people come to check it out. And if there was flowers there, then people would come and check out the flowers. And then those people may well start talking about the flowers. And then they might hit it off and find that they've got things in common that makes them want to continue talking. So a garden can be the start, the formation of a human community. All you got to do is set one up in a public place, or even on a rooftop of a mixed office commercial building. And my dream personally is to get into one office block and invite as many companies within that building to share space up on the rooftop, so that staff from different companies within that building would go upstairs during their lunch break and after work, and they would all be gardening, and then the company that owns this corner plot would look over there and see that company's growing tomatoes. People from here would go to there and say, how do you grow tomatoes? People from that company might see this company's growing cucumbers. Information would quickly get shared, and people within the building who would not otherwise meet would meet. And if there was an earthquake, if you know someone and you trust someone, you're more likely to help them, and they're more likely to help you. So a garden can be an amazing community builder to start friendships, to share knowledge, and to share food. That's just one thing. The other thing that I think is really important is to give food. Give food away to people that need it. And that's why I've started a very special strategy called Food Havens. And in a nutshell, my Food Havens strategy can be summed up in four words. Grow some, give some. And this is something that I've really been pushing with the schools that I teach at. And I've been getting the schools to basically allocate, for example, one raised garden or 3 or 4 square meters of ground garden space to grow food to give to the local food bank.
That's wonderful.
To give to the local food bank. And by doing this, the students who I've been teaching, they've been planting and growing food that they know that they are not going to eat, but that they know that they're going to donate to the local food bank. And over the last about 12 years, I've arranged for multiple food donations from schools about 75 to 80 kilograms of student-grown food has been donated from my client schools to Second Harvest Japan Food Bank up in Tokyo. And these are like one donation per season at the end of each season, coming from specific schools going to one food bank. The Food Haven strategy, when this gets bigger, will have possibly like 1,000 schools in one city, 10,000 companies using their rooftops, all of them growing some, giving some food free to their local food banks or community support groups, and flooding those with free food that's been grown in the same city to alleviate hunger issues and feed people who don't have enough. And I see this strategy spreading from Tokyo to Osaka, Kyoto, Nara, Singapore, Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Auckland, Sydney, you name it, everywhere, worldwide. And it's not a theory, it's been working for the last 10 years. It's potentially massive. It's basically where people in cities grow some food, mainly for themselves, but also to share and give to people that have more need for that food than they do.
It's great to see that the food production in urban environments is not necessarily just a thing that may be good for your own fridge where you have your own food, but it, like you said, it can help to build a community, gather people around, not only around the food, but to be there to help each other and to create something from nearly nothing and be able to share this with others that are in need. And I think this is a great place to kind of wrap up this conversation we've had today about urban farming and all the benefits, because this was maybe the most important message that we could share here today. So thank you for saying that and bringing it up at the end of our conversation.
My pleasure. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming all the way from Tokyo. We will make sure to include all your links so people can find you, find your work, and if they want more resources, more information about you and about urban farming, we will make sure to provide it. And hopefully we'll have interesting questions as well, which maybe we can bring back to you.
Sure. Sounds good. Yeah. So just to sort of wrap up, when it comes to growing food, most people grow food for themselves, but it's really, really good to share the concept that food can be used as a power for good. And when people grow food to give to other people that need it, they sort of come to sort of quickly realize that food can have real impact, social impact, to not just benefit the growers, but to benefit the community. It's massive. It's really, really big. And I really want to spread that idea worldwide from now on to get as many people in as many cities as possible right around the world to grow some and give some and make a real impact on the world in 2024 going forward. It's all totally possible.
Grow some, give some.
Yeah, grow some, give some, yeah. Thank
you, John. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
This was Unpacking Japan, live from Osaka, and we'll be back next week. Bye.
Thank you.